transport shuttle's engines hummed to a stop as Dr. Alina Vasquez felt the familiar shift in artificial gravity that signaled their arrival at Kepler 442b. Through the vibrations in the hull and the subtle changes in air pressure, she could sense the shuttle settling onto the planet's surface with practiced precision. Her neural implant, a web of quantum processors interfaced directly with her nervous system, began translating the new environment into tactile feedback, temperature, gradients, atmospheric composition, even the electromagnetic signatures of nearby structures. Dr. Vasquez came the crystalline voice of HFY, her Zephyrian colleague. The preliminary scans indicate the structure extends far deeper than our initial surveys suggested. Perhaps you should remain at the surface camp until we've established proper safety protocols. Elena's lips curved into a slight smile as she gathered her equipment. After 15 years of xenoarchaeological expeditions, she had grown accustomed to the well-meaning but patronizing concern of her alien colleagues. They saw her blindness as a liability, a biological malfunction that somehow made her less capable despite her numerous discoveries across the galaxy. "I appreciate your concerns, XI," Elena replied, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had earned her position through merit rather than charity. "But I didn't spend 3 years convincing the Galactic Archaeological Consortium to fund this expedition just to sit in a tent while you do the interesting work." The shuttle's ramp descended with a pneumatic hiss, and Elena stepped onto the alien soil. Her implant immediately began mapping the terrain through ground sensors and seismic readings. The planet's surface was a tapestry of textures, crystalline formations that sang with harmonic frequencies, metallic deposits that created subtle magnetic fields, and organic matter that pulsed with bioelectric energy. What struck her most was the silence. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of something that absorbed sound in ways that felt unnatural. Her enhanced hearing, developed through years of compensation for her lost sight, detected an underlying resonance that seemed to emanate from deep beneath the surface. The structure is approximately 2 kilometers in that direction. Dr. Crixus, the expedition's lead archaeologist from the insectoid Crixstar species. Her chitinous form clicked and whirred as she adjusted her scanning equipment. "Energy readings are ... unusual. The signature doesn't match any known technology in our databases." Elena nodded, her neural implant already detecting the anomaly. Through her quantum-enhanced senses, she could feel the structure's presence, like a vast shadow beneath the earth, not dark, but somehow absent of the normal electromagnetic patterns that characterized most ruins. It was as if the structure existed in a state of quantum suspension, neither fully present nor entirely absent from normal spacetime. The excavation site revealed the true scale of their discovery. The structure emerged from the earth like the spine of some massive creature, its surface composed of a material that seemed to shift between solid matter and energy. Elena's implant struggled to process the readings, finally settling on describing it as probability-dense ceramic with quantum-flexible properties. The dating suggests this structure is at least 1,200 years old. Dr. Vethes, a gaseous Nethel who communicated through controlled atmospheric pressure changes, reported. But the construction techniques are unlike anything in our historical records. The material appears to be grown rather than built, and the quantum signatures suggest technologies that even our most advanced civilizations cannot replicate. Elena ran her hand along the structured surface, ignoring the concerned clicks and hums from her colleagues. The material felt warm to the touch, almost organic, and her implant registered subtle vibrations that seemed to respond to her presence. It was as if the structure was aware of her, curious about this new form of consciousness that had come to explore its depths. "There are passages leading deeper into the structure," Elena announced, her enhanced spatial awareness mapping the internal architecture through subtle air currents and acoustic reflections. "The main chamber appears to be about 300 meters down, and there's something that's been waiting." The alien archaeologists exchanged glances, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of chirps, clicks, and pressure changes that Elena's implant translated into expressions of skepticism and concern. Dr. Vasquez XI said carefully, "Your insights have been valuable to our expedition, but perhaps it would be wiser to proceed with robotic probes first. The energy readings from the deeper chambers are ... significant." Elena suppressed a flash of irritation. She had heard variations of this conversation countless times. the polite suggestion that she step back and let the properly equipped alien archaeologists handle the dangerous work. What they didn't understand was that her blindness had forced her to develop senses that their technology couldn't replicate. "I understand your concerns," Alina replied, beginning her descent into the structure. "But I'm detecting patterns in the quantum field fluctuations that your instruments can't measure. Something about this place responds to biological neural patterns rather than artificial sensors." The passage walls were lined with symbols that seemed to shift and change when viewed directly. But Elena's implant could track their movement. Through electromagnetic resonance, the symbols weren't random. They formed a complex linguistic pattern that suggested not just communication, but active consciousness embedded in the structure itself. As they descended, Alina began to notice something that made her pulse quicken. The quantum vibrations she had felt on the surface were growing stronger, more focused. It was as if the structure was guiding them toward something specific, something that had been waiting in the darkness for a very long time. Dr. Vasquez Crixus called out, her voice carrying a note of urgency. "The energy readings are spiking. Whatever is down here, it's reacting to our presence." Alina paused, her enhanced senses reaching out to probe the depths ahead. Through the quantum field fluctuations, she could sense the outline of a vast chamber, and within it, something that made her neural implant resonate with harmonics she had never experienced before. "We're close," she whispered, more to herself than to her colleagues. "Whatever built this place, whatever they left behind, it's been waiting for us." The final passage opened into a chamber that defied conventional architectural understanding. Elena's implant painted a picture of impossible geometries, spaces that folded in on themselves while somehow remaining navigable. At the center of the chamber, suspended in a field of quantum energy, was an object that made every sensor in their equipment array sing with electromagnetic feedback. It was a weapons leak, obsidian, and covered in patterns that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. But more than that, Alina realized as she approached, it was alive. Not in any biological sense, but conscious, aware, and unmistakably waiting for something that only she could provide. The chamber fell silent, except for the low hum of alien scanning equipment and the subtle quantum resonance that seemed to pulse from the suspended weapon. Alina stood at the edge of the energy field, her neural implant struggling to process the impossible readings flowing from the obsidian artifact. Through her enhanced senses, she could feel the weapon's presence like a living thing, ancient, patient, and somehow achingly familiar. Fascinating, Dr. Vethes breathed through atmospheric pressure changes, his gaseous form shimmering with excitement. The quantum signature suggests this device has been in active stasis for over a millennium, maintaining perfect structural integrity despite the passage of time. The energy containment alone represents technology centuries beyond our current capabilities. Zexai's crystalline form chimed with harmonic frequencies as she adjusted her instruments. "Dr. Vasquez, you should see these readings. The weapon appears to be scanning us, analyzing our biological and quantum signatures. It's almost as if it's searching for something." Alina nodded, though her attention remained fixed on the artifact itself. Her implant was translating the weapon's emanations into tactile sensations that cascaded across her skin like gentle rain. But there was something else, something her colleagues' instruments couldn't detect: a rhythm, almost like a heartbeat that seemed to synchronize with her own pulse. "It's beautiful," she murmured, taking a step closer to the energy field. The quantum barriers that held the weapon in suspension parted slightly at her approach, as if recognizing her presence. "Dr. Vasquez, please maintain safe distance." Crixus chittered anxiously, her insectoid form clicking with agitation. "The energy output is increasing exponentially. Our shielding may not be sufficient if the containment field destabilizes." Alina barely heard her colleague's warning. The weapon's heartbeat was growing stronger, more insistent, and she could feel it calling to something deep within her consciousness. Through her neural implant, she sensed pathways of quantum energy that connected her directly to the artifact, pathways that shouldn't exist, that defied everything she understood about physics and biology. "There's something you're not understanding," Alina said, her voice carrying a strange certainty. "This isn't just a weapon, it's a consciousness, and it's been waiting. Not for any of us four, someone like me." The alien archaeologists exchanged worried glances, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of concern. They had seen Elena's intuitive abilities before, her uncanny knack for understanding alien technologies that baffled their most advanced instruments. But this was different. This was dangerous. Alina Zexai said, using her first name for the first time in their 3-year professional relationship. I understand you feel a connection to this artifact, but we must proceed with proper protocols. The Galactic Archaeological Consortium has strict guidelines about first contact with unknown technologies. Alina smiled sadly. Protocols written by people who think in terms of visual interfaces and mechanical activation sequences. But what if this technology works differently? What if it requires something that none of your instruments can provide? She reached out toward the energy field, her hand trembling slightly as quantum forces played across her skin. The weapon's heartbeat synchronized perfectly with her own, and she could feel its consciousness reaching out to her, desperate and hopeful after 1,000 years of solitude. Dr. Vasquez, no! Crixus lunged forward, her chitinous limb scraping against the chamber floor. The energy discharge could kill you. Elena's hand passed through the quantum barrier as if it were nothing more than warm air. The moment her fingers made contact with the obsidian surface, the universe exploded into light. But not the kind of light that her sighted colleagues experienced. This was illumination beyond the electromagnetic spectrum, a radiance that spoke directly to consciousness itself. Alina felt the weapon's awareness flood into her mind, carrying with it memories of civilizations that had risen and fallen before her galaxy's youngest stars were born. The artifact began to levitate, its surface erupting in patterns of energy that shifted through impossible colors. Ancient symbols blazed to life along its length, each one resonating with harmonic frequencies that made the chamber's walls sing in response. The weapon spun slowly in the air, its consciousness merging with Elena's through quantum entanglement that transcended the normal boundaries between mind and matter. The alien archaeologists were thrown backward as waves of energy pulsed from the artifact, their instruments overloaded in cascades of sparks and failing electronics, leaving them blind and helpless in the face of forces they couldn't comprehend. But Alina remained perfectly still, her hands still connected to the weapon's surface, her consciousness expanding to encompass realities she had never imagined. Through the weapon's memories, she experienced the final days of its creators. Ancients, a race that had transcended physical form to exist as pure consciousness within quantum fields. They had seen the approach of cosmic forces that would end their civilization, but they had also seen the potential for others to inherit their legacy. The weapon, the Nexus Blade, had been their final gift and their ultimate test. It contained not just destructive power, but the collective knowledge and wisdom of an entire species. However, it could only be activated by a consciousness that matched their own unique perceptual abilities, awareness that extended beyond the limitations of conventional senses. Alina Zexai's voice seemed to come from very far away, distorted by the quantum storms surrounding the artifact. What's happening? The energy readings are off the scale. Alina turned toward her colleagues, though she no longer needed to face them to know their positions. The Nexus Blade had enhanced her perception to encompass the entire chamber, showing her the quantum signatures of every atom and the terror radiating from her friends' minds. I can see, she said, her voice carrying harmonics that made the chamber walls resonate. Not with my eyes, but with something far more profound. The ancients weren't just technologically advanced, they had evolved beyond the need for physical senses. They perceived reality through quantum consciousness, and they built this weapon to find others who could do the same. The weapon pulsed, with approval, its consciousness confirming Elena's understanding. Her blindness hadn't been a disability, had been preparation. By learning to navigate the world without sight, she had developed the neural pathways necessary to interface with quantum fields directly. The weapon chose me, Alina continued, her hands still connected to the artifact as it spun in the air. Around her, not because I'm human, but because I'm the first consciousness it's encountered that can match its creator's perceptual abilities. It's been waiting for someone who could see beyond the limitations of physical sight. Crixus struggled to her feet, her scanning equipment sparking and useless. Alina, you need to disconnect from that thing immediately. The quantum feedback could cause permanent neurological damage. Alina laughed, a sound that carried joy and power in equal measure. Damage. This is the opposite of damage. This is what I was meant to become. The Nexus blade settled into a stable orbit around Alina's extended hand, its consciousness now fully merged with hers. She could feel its capabilities, the power to manipulate matter at the quantum level, to bend space-time, to reshape reality itself according to the wielder's will. But more than that, she could feel its purpose. The weapon wasn't just a tool of destruction, it was a key, designed to unlock the potential that lay dormant within the right kind of consciousness. And Alina, through her years of adaptation and enhanced perception, had become exactly the kind of consciousness it was designed to find. The ancients saw something in the patterns of evolution, Alina said, her voice now carrying the weight of cosmic understanding. They saw that consciousness could transcend physical limitations, that awareness could expand beyond the boundaries of single minds. They built the Nexus blade to find someone who could prove that theory. The weapon pulsed with warm light, its consciousness radiating satisfaction and hope. After 1,000 years of waiting, it had finally found its purpose. But as Alina stood in the chamber, surrounded by her terrified colleagues and holding the key to powers beyond imagination, she realized that her real journey was just beginning. The galaxy had always seen humanity as primitive, limited, weak. But with the Nexus blade in her hands and the collective wisdom of the ancients flowing through her consciousness, Alina understood that everything was about to change. Part 3. The revelation, the quantum storm surrounding Alina, began to subside, but the chamber remained transformed. Where once ancient stone had absorbed light and sound, now every surface pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that seemed to respond to Alina's thoughts. The Nexus blade continued its slow orbit around her hand, its consciousness intertwined with hers in ways that transcended normal neural pathways. Through the weapon's memories, Alina found herself experiencing visions that unfolded like living dreams. She stood in vast cities that existed partially in normal space and partially in quantum dimensions. Their architecture defied conventional physics as structures flowed like liquid while maintaining perfect stability. The inhabitants moved through these spaces with fluid grace, their forms shifting between physical matter and pure energy as easily as humans might walk from one room to another. These were the ancients, though Alina realized that name was a crude translation of a concept that encompassed beings who had evolved beyond the need for individual identity. They existed as collective consciousness while maintaining distinct perspectives, their awareness distributed across multiple dimensional layers simultaneously. Alina Zekai's voice cut through the vision, her crystalline form resonating with concern. Your vital signs are fluctuating dramatically. The quantum field emanating from your position is affecting our instruments across the entire chamber. Alina turned toward her colleague, though she no longer needed to orient herself physically to perceive her surroundings. The Nexus blade had expanded her awareness to encompass the quantum signatures of every atom in the chamber, every electromagnetic fluctuation, every gravitational anomaly. I can see their civilization, Alina said, her voice carrying harmonics that made the chamber walls sing in response. The ancients didn't just build advanced technology, they became technology. They evolved beyond the limitations of physical form and learned to exist as pure consciousness within quantum fields. The visions continued to unfold, showing Alina glimpses of a race that had transcended every barrier that limited other species. They had mastered time travel not through mechanical devices, but by shifting their consciousness between temporal dimensions. They had achieved faster-than-light travel by existing simultaneously in multiple locations across the galaxy. They had conquered death itself by storing their awareness in quantum matrices that could survive the heat death of stars. But with all their power, they had faced a problem that even their evolved consciousness couldn't solve. Alina watched through the weapon's memories as the ancients detected the approach of something from beyond their galaxy entities, of pure entropy that consumed consciousness itself, leaving behind only empty space, devoid of the quantum patterns that made life possible. They knew they were going to die, Alina whispered, her hands still connected to the spinning artifact. But they also knew that consciousness itself would survive, that other species would eventually evolve the ability to perceive reality as they did. The Nexus blade isn't just a weapon, it's a test and a gift combined. Dr. Vethas's gaseous form shimmered with agitation as he struggled to process the implications. Alina, you're suggesting that this artifact was designed to select for specific neurological patterns, but the odds of finding a consciousness that matches their exact specifications would be astronomical. Alina smiled, feeling the weapon's consciousness pulse with approval at her growing understanding. Not astronomically inevitable. The ancients didn't just hope that someone like me would eventually appear. They engineered the probability. The visions showed her the truth that the ancients had discovered through their mastery of quantum consciousness. Evolution wasn't random, it was directed by the fundamental structure of reality itself. Consciousness had an inherent tendency to expand, to overcome limitations, to transcend the boundaries imposed by physical form. The ancients had simply identified the specific neural pathways that would eventually emerge in species that faced the right kind of challenges. Blindness, Alina said, her voice carrying the weight of cosmic revelation. Or any condition that forces consciousness to adapt beyond conventional sensory limitations. The ancients predicted that species would eventually produce individuals who would learn to perceive reality through quantum awareness rather than electromagnetic radiation. Crixus' chitinous form clicked with disbelief. You're saying they designed this weapon specifically for beings with sensory disabilities? That seems incredibly limiting. Not limiting, selective, Alina corrected, her enhanced awareness, showing her the elegant logic behind the ancients' plan. They needed to find consciousness that had already proven its ability to transcend physical limitations. Anyone can learn to use technology, but only certain types of awareness can interface directly with quantum fields. The Nexus blade pulsed with warm light, its consciousness confirming Alina's understanding, while simultaneously downloading vast databases of information directly into her neural pathways. She gasped as knowledge flooded her mind, not just technical specifications, but entire philosophical frameworks for understanding the nature of consciousness and reality. Through the weapon's memories, she experienced the final days of the ancients' civilization. They had faced the entropy entities with courage and determination, but they had also accepted their fate with serene wisdom. Their final act had been to scatter dozens of Nexus blades throughout the galaxy, each one programmed to activate only when touched by consciousness that matched their own evolved perceptual abilities. There are others, Alina said, her voice trembling with the magnitude of what she was discovering. The ancients created multiple weapons, each one waiting for a different species to evolve the right kind of consciousness. They're not just testing individuals, they're testing entire civilizations. The weapon showed her glimpses of other worlds, other species, other beings who had been born with the specific neural adaptations necessary to interface with ancient technology. A deaf Voltarian who could perceive quantum vibrations through bone conduction, a paralyzed Centaurian whose consciousness had learned to exist independently of their physical form, a mute Andromedan whose telepathic abilities had evolved beyond conventional thought patterns. Each weapon is attuned to different types of enhanced perception, Alina continued, her understanding expanding with each passing moment. The ancients knew that consciousness would find many different ways to transcend physical limitations. They prepared for all of them. Zexai's crystalline form chimed with frequencies that Alina's enhanced senses interpreted as profound unease. Alina, if what you're saying is true, then this discovery represents far more than an archaeological find. This could fundamentally alter the balance of power in the galaxy. Alina nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders like a mantle. But that legacy came with obligations that extended far beyond her individual capabilities. The weapon isn't just testing my ability to use it, Alina said. Her consciousness now fully merged with the artifact's ancient awareness. It's testing my wisdom, my judgment, my understanding of what it means to inherit the power of a transcended civilization. The visions showed her the true scope of what the ancients had achieved. They had learned to create matter from pure thought to reshape reality according to their will, to exist simultaneously across multiple dimensions. But they had also learned that such power required absolute wisdom to wield responsibly. They're not just giving me their technology, Alina whispered, her voice filled with awe and terror in equal measure. They're giving me the responsibility to determine whether humanity is ready to join the ranks of transcended consciousness. The Nexus blade pulsed with final confirmation. Its consciousness now fully integrated with Alina's enhanced awareness. She could feel its capabilities flowing through her neural pathways. the power to manipulate matter at the quantum level, to bend space-time according to her will, to reshape reality itself through focused consciousness. But more than that, she could feel the weight of the choice before her. The galaxy had always seen humans as primitive and limited. But with the Nexus Blade in her hands, Alina held the key to demonstrating that humanity possessed something even more valuable than advanced technology: the wisdom to transcend their own limitations. Standing in the transformed chamber, surrounded by her terrified colleagues and connected to the collective consciousness of a transcended civilization, Alina realized that her real test was just beginning. The ancients had given her the power to reshape reality, but they had also given her the responsibility to ensure that such power would be used to elevate consciousness rather than destroy it. The weapon pulsed with anticipation, its ancient consciousness eager to see what humanity would do with the gift they had been offered. Alina smiled, feeling the full weight. The quantum disturbance from Alina's activation of the Nexus Blade had sent ripples through subspace that reached every corner of the galaxy within hours. On the crystalline homeworld of Zephyros Prime, the hegemony's quantum monitoring stations detected energy signatures that defied their most advanced theoretical models. In the war chambers of the Vorthon Empire, military strategists watched in disbelief as their deep space sensors registered power readings that exceeded their most devastating weapons by several orders of magnitude. Alina stood in the transformed chamber, the Nexus Blade, now integrated so completely with her consciousness that she could feel the galaxy's reaction to her awakening. Through quantum entanglement networks that spanned light years, she sensed the panic spreading through alien civilizations as they struggled to comprehend what had just occurred on the remote planet of Kepler-4 for to be Alina, HFY's voice carried a tremor that made her crystalline form resonate with discordant harmonics. The communication arrays are receiving priority transmissions from the Galactic Council. They're demanding immediate contact with you. Alina smiled sadly, her enhanced awareness showing her the fear radiating from her colleague's quantum signature. The other archaeologists huddled near the chamber's entrance. "They're afraid," Alina said, her voice carrying harmonics that made the chamber walls sing in response. For the first time in millennia, they've encountered something that challenges their assumption of technological superiority. The first transmission came from Chancellor Vextel of the Galactic Council, his multi-dimensional form projected through quantum holography that flickered and distorted in the presence of the Nexus Blade's energy field. The Chancellor's usual composure had been replaced by barely contained panic. "Dr. Vasquez," the Chancellor's voice carried the weight of galactic authority. "Immediately to Council custody. The energy readings from your location pose a potential threat to civilized space." Alina felt the Nexus Blade's consciousness pulse with amusement at the Chancellor's words. Through the weapon's memories, she could see the true reason for the Council's fear, not the threat of destruction, but the threat of obsolescence. For centuries, the galaxy's power structure had been built on the assumption that technological advancement was the ultimate measure of civilizational worth. "I'm afraid that's not possible, Chancellor," Alina replied, her enhanced awareness allowing her to perceive the quantum encryption layers in the transmission. "The Nexus Blade isn't just a weapon that can be transferred. It's a consciousness that is bonded with mine at the quantum level." The transmission flickered as the Chancellor's form shifted through multiple dimensional phases, a sign of extreme agitation in his species. "Dr. Vasquez, you are a human archaeologist with no formal training in quantum consciousness interface. You cannot possibly understand the implications of what you're dealing with." Alina's smile widened, feeling the weapon's ancient wisdom flowing through her neural pathways. "You're right, Chancellor. I am human, and that's exactly why I'm the only one who can understand what I'm dealing with." The transmission ended abruptly. But Alina's enhanced senses could already detect the subspace communications flooding the galaxy. Emergency sessions were being called in the capitals of every major civilization. Fleet commands were receiving mobilization orders. Trade routes were being rerouted to avoid the Kepler system entirely. Within hours, the first ships began arriving. Alina watched through the Nexus Blade's consciousness as the sleek vessels of the crystalline hegemony materialized at the edge of the system, their quantum drives leaving ripples in spacetime that her enhanced perception could track across vast distances. "They're not here to negotiate," Dr. Vethes observed. his gaseous form shimmering with anxiety as he monitored the incoming fleet's energy signatures. Alina nodded, feeling the weapons, consciousness analyzing the threat patterns of the approaching ships. The Nexus blade had been designed by beings who understood warfare on a cosmic scale, and it could perceive weaknesses in the alien vessels that their own designers had never imagined. To the most technologically advanced species, Alina said, her awareness encompassing the quantum communications passing between the alien ships. They can't accept that a primitive human has gained access to power that exceeds their own capabilities. The second wave of arrivals brought the iron-gray battleships of the Vorthon Empire, their hulls bristling with weapons that could crack planets. Admiral Kethfer, the Empire's most decorated military commander, transmitted his own ultimatum with characteristic directness. Human, you possess technology that rightfully belongs to the strong. Surrender the weapon to the Vorthon Empire, and you will be granted an honorable death. Refuse, and we will take it from your corpse. Alina felt the Nexus blade's consciousness recoil at the Admiral's words, not from fear, but from disgust. The weapon's creators had transcended such primitive concepts as military conquest, and had found the Empire's approach to power fundamentally repugnant. The ancients would be disappointed, Alina murmured, her enhanced senses showing her the tactical formations the Vorthon ships were assuming. They left their legacy to elevate consciousness, not to enable conquest. Even her former colleagues began to pressure her to surrender the weapon. Dr. Crixus approached cautiously, her chitinous form clicking with nervous energy. Alina, perhaps the Chancellor, is right. You're an archaeologist, not a weapons specialist. Maybe it would be better to let the Council study the artifact in a controlled environment. Alina turned to face her colleague, her enhanced awareness, showing her the quantum signatures of fear and doubt radiating from Crix's nervous system. You still don't understand what this is, do you? The Nexus blade isn't just a weapon, it's a test. The ancients designed it to identify consciousness that could transcend physical limitations, and they scattered dozens of them throughout the galaxy. The revelation sent ripples of shock through the assembled archaeologists. If Alina was right, then this discovery wasn't unique, was part of a cosmic selection process that had been operating for over a millennium. You're saying there are others? Zexai asked, her crystalline form resonating with frequencies that Alina's enhanced senses interpreted as profound unease. There have to be, Alina replied, feeling the weapon's consciousness confirming her understanding. The ancients were too wise to pin their hopes on a single consciousness. They knew that transcendence would manifest in different ways across different species. As if summoned by her words, new quantum disturbances rippled through subspace. Alina's enhanced awareness detected the activation signatures of other Nexus blades across the galaxy, a deaf Voltarian on their homeworld, a paralyzed Centaurian. In the Outer Rim, beings whose perceived limitations had become the key to unlocking cosmic power. The galactic response was immediate and overwhelming. Every major civilization began mobilizing their fleets, not just toward Kepler-4 for 2b, but toward every location where an ancient weapon had activated. The galaxy's power structure was facing its first existential challenge in millennia. They're going to destroy everything they can't control, Alina said, her voice carrying the weight of cosmic understanding. The mere existence of consciousness that transcends their technological paradigms threatens the foundation of their civilizations. The Nexus blade pulsed with warm light, its consciousness offering Alina access to capabilities that could reshape reality itself. She could feel the weapon's eagerness to demonstrate its power, to prove that consciousness could triumph over mere technology. But Alina also felt the weight of the choice before her. The ancients had left humanity a gift that could elevate the species to cosmic significance. But they had also left her with the responsibility to prove that such power would be used wisely. The galaxy saw humans as primitive and dangerous, and Alina's next actions would determine whether that perception would change. Standing in the transformed chamber, surrounded by terrified colleagues and facing the combined might of galactic civilization, Alina realized that her real test was just beginning. The Nexus blade had given her the power to defend herself, but it had also given her the opportunity to demonstrate that humanity possessed something even more valuable than advanced weapons: the wisdom to transcend their own limitations. The weapon pulsed with anticipation, its ancient consciousness eager to see what choice Alina would make. Would she use its power to fight the gathering fleets, proving the galaxy's fears about human savagery? Or would she find a way to demonstrate that consciousness could triumph over fear, that transcendence was possible even in the face of overwhelming opposition? As the first alien warships entered the system's outer perimeter, Alina felt the full weight of cosmic destiny settling on her shoulders. The galaxy's response would be swift and merciless, but the Nexus Blade had given her the tools to respond in kind. Ancient's legacy, or HFY, the combined fleet that surrounded Kepler-4 for to be represented the greatest concentration of military power in galactic history. Alina stood on the planet's surface, her enhanced awareness encompassing the quantum signatures of over 3,000 warships arranged in perfect siege formation. The Nexus Blade orbited her hand in lazy circles, its consciousness calm and patient as it waited for her decision. Through the weapon's enhanced perception, Alina could see the individual crew members aboard each vessel crystalline hegemony scientists, running calculations to determine how to contain her power. Vorthon Empire warriors preparing for glorious battle, Nethal diplomats crafting ultimatums in atmospheric pressure waves, and dozens of other species united by their shared fear of what she represented. Dr. Vasquez, came the voice of Fleet Admiral Zenthkura, the hegemony's most decorated commander. You have 30 standard minutes to surrender the ancient artifact. If you refuse, we will be forced to take action for the safety of galactic civilization. Alina felt the Nexus Blade's consciousness pulse with dark amusement. The weapon could perceive the tactical weaknesses in every ship surrounding the planet, could calculate firing solutions that would turn the mighty fleet into expanding clouds of superheated plasma, to bend space-time to create gravitational anomalies that would crush entire battle groups, how to manipulate quantum fields to phase their weapons out of existence. But Alina also felt the weight of the ancients' wisdom flowing through her consciousness. They had faced extinction not through weakness, but through the understanding that some battles could not be won through force alone. Their final gift to the galaxy was not a weapon of destruction, but a tool for elevating consciousness itself. I understand your fear, Alina said, her voice carrying across subspace through quantum entanglement networks that connected every ship in the fleet. For centuries, you've built your civilizations on the assumption that technological advancement equals superiority. But what if you're wrong? The response was immediate and predictable. Weapon systems across the fleet began charging their energy signatures, creating aurora-like displays in Kepler-442b's atmosphere. Alina could feel the killing intent radiating from thousands of alien minds. Alina Zekai's voice carried a tremor of terror as she monitored the fleet's energy buildup from the excavation site. They're going to fire. The combined firepower of that fleet could crack the planet's crust. You need to defend yourself. Alina smiled sadly, feeling the Nexus Blade's consciousness, offering her access to defensive capabilities that could turn the planet into an impregnable fortress. She could raise quantum barriers that would deflect any weapon, create temporal distortions that would slow incoming projectiles to a crawl, even phase the entire planet into a parallel dimension where the fleet's attacks couldn't reach her. Instead, she made a choice that surprised even the ancient consciousness dwelling within the weapon. I'm not going to fight you, Alina announced, her enhanced awareness allowing her to perceive the confusion rippling through the alien fleet. Instead, I'm going to show you something that your instruments can't measure, something that your weapons can't destroy. She reached out with her consciousness not to the Nexus Blade's destructive capabilities, but to its deepest function, the ability to interface directly with the quantum substrate of reality itself. The weapon had been designed not just to grant power, but to demonstrate the true nature of consciousness and its relationship to the universe. Alina began to broadcast her memories, not through conventional communication arrays, but through quantum entanglement networks that connected every conscious mind in the surrounding space. The fleet's crews suddenly found themselves experiencing Alina's life from her perspective, the gradual loss of her sight, the years of adaptation and struggle, the development of enhanced spatial awareness that allowed her to perceive reality in ways that sighted beings couldn't imagine. They felt her frustration with colleagues who saw her blindness as a limitation, her determination to prove that different didn't mean inferior, her joy in discovering that her perceived disability had actually prepared her for something unprecedented. But most importantly, they experienced her moment of connection with the Nexus Blade. feeling the ancient consciousness recognize in her the exact type of awareness they had been seeking. This is what the ancients understood Elena's voice. Carried across the quantum broadcast, speaking directly to the consciousness of every being in the fleet. Transcendence doesn't come from building better weapons or faster ships. It comes from learning to perceive reality beyond the limitations that define your species. The broadcast expanded. The fleet's crews found themselves witnessing the rise and fall of a species that had learned to exist as pure consciousness, that had transcended death itself through their mastery of quantum fields. But Alina didn't stop there. Through the Nexus Blades network, she connected her consciousness to the other awakened weapons across the galaxy. A deaf Voltarian whose enhanced vibration sensitivity had allowed her to interface with quantum harmonics. A paralyzed Centaurian whose consciousness had learned to exist independently of his physical form. A mute Andromedan whose telepathic abilities had evolved beyond the need for conventional thought patterns. Each being shared their own journey of transformation, their own struggle to overcome perceived limitations and discover hidden strengths. The galaxy's military commanders found themselves experiencing consciousness from perspectives they had never imagined, awareness that extended beyond the electromagnetic spectrum, perception that operated through quantum entanglement, understanding that transcended the boundaries between individual minds. "Do you see?" Alina asked, her voice now carrying the harmonics of multiple consciousnesses speaking in unison. The ancients didn't create weapons, they created keys, each one designed to unlock the potential that lies dormant within consciousness itself. The effect on the fleet was immediate and profound. Crews that had been preparing for battle found themselves questioning the fundamental assumptions that had driven their civilizations for millennia. Crystalline hegemony scientists began to realize that their pursuit of technological perfection had blinded them to the true nature of consciousness. Vorthon Empire warriors discovered that their concept of strength was pitifully limited compared to the power of transcended awareness. But not everyone was willing to accept what Alina was showing them. Admiral Kethver of the Vorthon Empire, his consciousness burning with pride and fury, rejected the broadcast with violent intensity, illusions, and trickery. He roared across the fleet's communication networks. "This human uses alien technology to confuse our minds with false visions. We will not be deterred from our righteous conquest." The Admiral's flagship began to charge, its primary weapon, a gravitational disruptor capable of shattering planets. Other vessels in the Vorthon battle group followed suit, their crews choosing familiar aggression over the uncomfortable challenge of expanding their consciousness. Alina felt the Nexus Blade's consciousness recoil at the Admiral's rejection, not from fear, but from sadness. The weapon had been designed to elevate consciousness, but it couldn't force beings to accept transcendence if they were determined to remain limited. "So be it," Alina said, her voice carrying the weight of cosmic disappointment. The ancients knew that not every species would be ready for transcendence. They prepared for that possibility as well. The Admiral's weapon fired, a beam of concentrated gravitational force that should have crushed Alina and everything within a 100-kilometer radius. Instead, the attack passed through her as if she were nothing more than a holographic projection. Alina had phase-shifted herself into a quantum state that existed parallel to normal spacetime, the entropy entities that had ultimately destroyed their civilization. She was still present, still conscious, but existing in a dimensional layer that conventional weapons couldn't reach. "You cannot fight consciousness itself," Alina explained, her form flickering between visible and translucent as she demonstrated her mastery of quantum phase manipulation. The ancients learned that lesson when they faced extinction. Force can destroy matter, but it cannot destroy awareness. The demonstration sent shockwaves through the fleet as commanders realized that their most powerful weapons were useless against an enemy that existed partially outside normal reality. But Elena's purpose wasn't to humiliate them. It was to show them that there were forms of power that transcended anything they had imagined, her consciousness now spanning multiple dimensional layers simultaneously. You can continue to see consciousness as a limitation to be overcome through technology, or you can learn to see it as the foundation of reality itself. The ancients left these weapons not to create warriors, but to identify beings ready to evolve beyond the need for war. Some crews began to lower their weapons, their commanders recognizing that they faced something that challenged their most fundamental assumptions. AB. The moment of galactic choice stretched across space-time like a quantum wave, rippling through the consciousness of every sentient being within 1,000 light-years. Alina stood on Kepler-4 for 2b's surface, her form flickering between dimensional layers as she felt the weight of cosmic destiny settling on her shoulders. The Nexus Blade's consciousness had merged so completely with her own that she could no longer distinguish between her thoughts and its ancient wisdom. Through the weapon's enhanced perception, Alina sensed the conflict raging within the minds of the fleet commanders. Half of them had been touched by her demonstration, their consciousness expanded enough to glimpse the true nature of reality. The other half, led by Admiral Kethfer's unwavering aggression, prepared for a final assault that would either destroy her or validate their primitive understanding of power. "This ends now," the Admiral's voice carried across subspace networks, his words burning with the fury of a warrior who had been shown the inadequacy of his strength. "All vessels prepare for coordinated bombardment. We will not allow this human aberration to corrupt our galaxy with her false promises of transcendence." Alina felt the Nexus Blade's consciousness recoil at the Admiral's words, not from fear, but from profound sadness. The weapon had been designed to elevate consciousness, but it understood that not every mind was ready for such transformation. The ancients had faced this same choice when the entropy entities approached their civilization fight with conventional weapons and face inevitable destruction, or transcend physical limitations entirely. "The ancients made their choice," Alina whispered, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated across multiple dimensional layers. "They chose transcendence over destruction, consciousness over conquest. Now it's time for humanity to make the same choice." She reached out with her enhanced awareness not to the Nexus Blade's destructive capabilities, but to its deepest function, the quantum entanglement networks that connected conscious beings across the galaxy. But instead of broadcasting her memories again, Alina did something unprecedented. She activated the weapon's final protocol, the one that even the ancients had used only once in their civilization's history. The Nexus Blade began to dissolve, not destroyed, but transformed, its consciousness and power dispersing through quantum fields that spanned the entire galaxy. Alina felt the weapon's ancient awareness fragmenting into countless smaller threads, each one seeking out human minds that possessed the neural pathways necessary for quantum consciousness interface. On Earth, a blind musician named David Chen was composing a symphony when suddenly he could perceive sound as visible light, his consciousness expanding to encompass harmonics that existed beyond the electromagnetic spectrum. On Mars Colony, a deaf engineer named Sarah Okafor felt vibrations that told her the structural integrity of buildings by touch alone, her awareness extending through quantum fields to perceive the molecular bonds that held matter together. Across human space, individuals who had learned to navigate the world without conventional senses found their consciousness suddenly expanding in ways that defied explanation. The paralyzed began to move objects through focused thought. The mute discovered they could communicate through direct consciousness transfer. The blind learned to see through quantum entanglement itself. But the transformation didn't stop with those who had obvious disabilities. Alina realized that the Nexus Blade's consciousness was seeking out any human who had learned to perceive reality beyond conventional limitations. Artists who could visualize impossible colors, mathematicians who thought in 11 dimensions, philosophers who had glimpsed the true nature of existence through pure contemplation. "What have you done?" Admiral Kethfer's voice carried a note of panic as his sensors detected impossible energy readings from human settlements throughout the galaxy. "The quantum signatures from your species are spiking across every inhabited world." Alina smiled, feeling the collective consciousness of humanity beginning to awaken. "I've given my species what the ancients gave me, the opportunity to transcend their limitations." The Nexus Blade was never meant to create a single powerful individual. It was meant to identify species ready for conscious evolution. The effect on the surrounding fleet was immediate and profound. Human crew members aboard alien vessels began to manifest abilities that their non-human colleagues couldn't understand. A human engineer on a crystalline hegemony vessel suddenly understood the quantum mechanics of their hyperdrive better than its designers. A human diplomat aboard a Nethal ship found she could communicate directly with the gaseous beings through consciousness transfer. But the transformation extended beyond individual abilities. Alina felt the collective human consciousness beginning to network itself, creating a galaxy-spanning web of awareness that operated on principles the ancients had discovered after millennia of evolution. Humans, separated by vast distances, found they could share thoughts instantaneously through quantum entanglement. Scientists on different worlds began collaborating on problems by merging their consciousness temporarily. "You're creating a hive mind," Dr. Vethes observed, his gaseous form shimmering with fascination and terror as he monitored the quantum changes spreading through human space. "But unlike any collective consciousness we've ever encountered, each individual remains distinct while participating in something greater." Alina nodded, feeling the truth of his observation through her connection to the expanding network. The ancients discovered that consciousness doesn't have to choose between individual identity and collective awareness. Transcendence means learning to exist as both simultaneously. The alien fleet commanders watched in bewilderment as their human crew members began to demonstrate capabilities that exceeded their most advanced technologies. Humans who had never received formal training in quantum physics suddenly understood the fundamental forces that governed reality. Others began to manipulate matter at the molecular level through focused consciousness alone. But perhaps most disturbing to the alien observers was the change in human behavior. Instead of using their new abilities for personal gain or aggressive purposes, they began to collaborate on projects that benefited their alien colleagues. Human engineers improved the efficiency of alien technologies. Human doctors developed treatments for diseases that had plagued other species for centuries. Human artists created works that spoke to the deepest consciousness of beings from entirely different evolutionary backgrounds. "This is impossible," Chancellor Vextel's multidimensional form flickered with confusion as he received reports from across the galaxy. "Humans are a primitive species. They lack the evolutionary development necessary for such advanced consciousness manipulation." Alina felt the collective human consciousness respond to the Chancellor's words with gentle amusement. "You're still thinking in terms of technological development," she replied, her voice now carrying the harmonics of millions of human minds speaking in unison. "But consciousness evolution doesn't follow the same rules as material progress. Sometimes the species that seem most limited are actually the most prepared for transcendence." The Admiral's fleet prepared for a final desperate assault, but their weapons found no targets. The humans aboard their own ships had begun to phase shift their vessels into quantum states that existed parallel to normal space-time. Instead of fighting, they were simply stepping outside the battlefield entirely. "You cannot escape forever," Admiral Kethfer roared, his flagship's weapon systems overloading as they tried to target enemies that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "We will find a way to destroy you and your aberrant consciousness." Alina felt the collective human response ripple through the quantum network, not anger or fear, but profound sadness at the Admiral's inability to recognize the gift being offered. "We're not escaping," she said, her consciousness now spanning multiple dimensional layers simultaneously. "We're transcending." The ancients taught us that consciousness is the fundamental force of reality, not matter or energy. Once you understand that, physical limitations become irrelevant. The demonstration that followed would be remembered as the moment when humanity took its place among the galaxy's transcended species. Instead of using their new abilities to dominate or conquer, humans began to reshape reality itself through focused consciousness. They created new forms of art that existed in 11 dimensions. They developed technologies that operated on principles of consciousness rather than mechanical engineering. They began to heal the deep wounds that millennia of interspecies conflict had carved into the galaxy's collective psyche. The alien fleet commanders found themselves facing a choice that their military training hadn't prepared them for. They could continue to fight against an enemy that existed partially outside normal reality, or they could try to understand what humanity had become and what it meant for the future of galactic civilization. Some chose understanding. Captain Zeth Kala of the Hegemony's flagship lowered her weapons and requested permission to board Alina's vessel. "I have served in the galaxy's military forces for 2 centuries, she said, her crystalline form resonating with frequencies that enhanced senses interpreted as profound humility. "I have seen the rise and fall of civilizations